this schedule really shapes up for a playoff run with a 12-team playoff.
Areas that, you need to get from experience, which is just, hey, I need to make quicker decisions.
How do you define success for this team?
National championship.
What's going on, y'all? Bud Elliott here of the Cover 3 College Football Podcast. This is my summer school series where we attempt to tackle as many college football teams as we can. Today, Oklahoma State, Go Pokes 247. That's McClain, Baxley. What's going on, man?
Doing good. Just enjoying the end of big season for the Pokes.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe a little better season on tap. I think we would be remiss if we don't get just kind of maybe a quick rundown of what the heck was that last year after that Arkansas game, which they came back and beat the Razorbacks. It kind of all fell apart. Like 10,000 foot view. If I'm not an Oklahoma State fan, what should I know about last year?
That went really wrong. Like you said, they barely beat Arkansas, and then have a blowout game against Tulsa, and then they go 0-9 in Big 12 play. I think you can look at the offensive line and quarterback play as a big factor of that. They stuck with Alan Bowman, who the year prior in 2023 did good enough, to put together 10 wins. They beat Oklahoma. They go to the Big 12 championships. They ride on him, and I think he was a little bit more exposed last season. The offensive line definitely struggled to give, reigning All-American running back Ollie Gordon any kind of holes or any kind of real boost. And then defensively, they were just a mess. Second year, Brian Nardo, a defensive coordinator, they really struggled in the secondary, really struggled to get much pass rush, and that was definitely hurt once, all-conference, all-American linebackers Colin Oliver and Nick Martin went down with early season-ending injuries. So just, a potpourri of errors that just, a team that preseason was expected to, compete for the Big 12 championship, compete to get a college football playoff spot, ends up going 0-9 in conference. And really, they should have been 2-10. Like you said, the Arkansas comeback was insane. I think at halftime of that game, we were all kind of, wondering, they're going to start 1-1 on the season, but they come back and somehow win that game. So could have been 2-10. They are 3-9. They then, fired every coach that's not named Mike Gundy, and brought a lot of different guys at coordinator, different guys across the field at assistant coaches from different stops. They definitely look completely different on paper and on the coaching staff than they did a year ago. And for Gundy's hope, that he hopes that's a good thing. He talked a little bit earlier about how just because they had a lot of experience last year didn't really mean much. Now they don't have as much experience, as much familiarity, and it could be better than what it was. So yeah, that's kind of the bird's eye view of everything that went wrong in the last 6 months for the Cowboys.
So, as you mentioned, they did completely clean house with the coaching staff. Doug Meacham takes over as OC. Alan Bowman's gone. Ollie Gordon, I believe, is gone, right? Top 3 receivers are all gone. What is this going to look like?
Good question. They have one starter returning, and that's a true sophomore tight end, Josh Ford. So they're going to have a new quarterback. They're going to have new running backs. And a lot of these guys have been around the program at receiver, at running back. It's kind of a running back by committee now. You don't have that one, every down back like you did, with Ollie Gordon or Chuba Hubbard in the past. But, yeah, I think they're going to be a very fast, very air raid heavy team. They've brought in, I think, almost 10 receivers from the transfer portal. They had a bunch of receivers that showed signs of that they could play at this level for Meacham. And so they've got a lot of tight ends, a lot of new offensive line players. I think their whole entire starting offensive line is going to be transfers that they brought in this offseason. So I think it's going to be a very air raid heavy, very pass heavy, and very fast offense that they want to do, kind of reminiscent of those, Justin Blackman, Brandon Whedon offenses that we saw earlier in Gundy's tenure. That just kind of, we're going to throw the ball a lot and we're going to get down the field in a hurry. I don't know if it'll be as efficient as those teams were, but they're hoping to kind of recreate that magic, it seems like.
So quarterback, Haas Haney, going to be Smith, Garrett Rangel. This is why we have you on, because I have no idea.
So there's a 0 chance it's going to be Garrett Rangel or Milwaukee Smith. They transferred out in the transfer portal. Smith is at Ole Miss now, and Rangel transferred to Virginia Tech. So they've got Haas Haney and Zane Flores. Flores, this is going to be his third year in the program. He came in as a highly high 3-star, low 4-star quarterback in the 2024 class. Kind of waited behind Bowman and Gunnar Gundy and Garrett Rangel that first year. Then last year dealt with a pretty bad foot injury that required surgery. So now he's kind of coming in as a guy that's going to try and be the guy. And then you've also got Haas Haney, a transfer from TCU. He knows Doug Meacham. He knows Kevin Johns, new quarterbacks coach. So he's very familiar with what they're trying to do. And those are the two guys that, coming out of spring practice, coming out of the spring game, Oklahoma State feels like those are those two guys that are best suited, which is why, Rangel and Smith left. The problem, they're two guys that they have a combined 3 games played. They have a combined 0 passes in a game. Zane Flores has never played in a game. Haas Haney played a little bit last year in TCU, exclusively as either a running quarterback or a handoff guy. So a lot of inexperience, and there's definitely talent. We saw in the limited spring, they were able to see it in the spring game that there's definitely talent. They've definitely both got speed and definitely are. I think Haas more so that dual threat quarterback that Gundy really likes and Meacham clearly likes. He's got a great speed. So those are your 2 quarterback options. They've also got Banks Bowen, who is a true freshman. If in case of emergency, like we saw last year, where quarterbacks went down quickly. But yeah, so they're really putting all their cards on 2 guys that have yet to throw a pass. But that also means they haven't thrown an interception. They haven't thrown a bad pass in a game. So I think that week 2 game against Oregon is going to be very eye-opening, regardless of who ends up getting the starting job. But yeah, a lot of inexperience at quarterback this year after having your quarterback at the last 2 years.
Exactly. Completely new offensive line. Obviously, that's maybe a concern, but maybe a positive as well, given what happened with last year's offensive line. What is your opinion? Like, is this thing going to be better? Do we think it can be better?
It's got to be. I think last year really. I mean, the last 2 years they rolled out most of the same guys. 4 or 5 of the guys were the same for both years. And 2023, I think Ollie Gordon helped them a lot. And like I said, he was an All-American running back, put up historic numbers, and so he kind of. And they won 10 games, regardless of who was starting last year. They got a little bit more exposed. Their age definitely kind of showed. And now they, like I said, I think all 5 guys that are going to start game 1 are transfers. These guys are veterans from they're not all coming from the SEC. There's a couple of guys from Power 4 schools. There's a couple of guys from Group of 5. There's a couple FCS guys that they've got in that they feel pretty good about. And they've continued. That's been the thing that they've continued to add depth to as the transfer portal's gone on this spring. Getting a guy like Bob Schick coming in, he's started 20 plus games for Virginia Tech. Casey Carpenter did really pretty well last year at Tulsa. Markel Samuel, a guy that did really well at App State for a couple of years. So they've continued to add these pieces to the offensive line. And I think it has to be better. I don't think there's any way for it to be worse than it was last year. So just a mild improvement would be a huge deal from last year to this year.
All right. So for all of our college fantasy players, who's the back we're drafting and who's the receiver we're drafting, and what do we think about them?
I like Rodney Fields as a running back. He came out last year as a true freshman and played in 4 games and looked pretty good. He's got good speed, really agile, and can catch the ball out of the backfield. He's not as dynamic. He's not as take over the game as Ollie Gordon was in years past. But I think he's got all the makings to be really good. And that was only with 1 off season to work with. And now he's had a full year. He's a redshirt freshman now, so I think he's going to be pretty good. And then receiver, it's kind of a thing by committee. And the 2 guys that I'm kind of looking for are Dwayne Lofton, a guy that transferred from Virginia Tech last year, played in 4 games, and they redshirted him. He's a slot guy. He's a speedster. And he's primarily playing outside now. Still as a smaller guy, as a faster guy. And then Terrell Davis, the guy from Central Oklahoma, Division II. And he actually led the NCAA in passing yards. All, Division 1, 2, 3, 7, whatever. He had the most passing yards in the country last year for a good, pretty decent UCO team at Division II level. It'd be interesting to see if that, competitiveness and that talent can translate to the Power 5, to Power 4 level. But I think it can. I think he's got the makings of a really talented receiver. He's going to be asked to do a lot. All these guys are. There's 6 or 7 guys I think they're really going to try to lean on. But those are the 2 that I'm most interested in looking for this year.
This is I feel like I'm learning a ton, and yet like I'm still like very uncertain about what this is going to look like when they actually put toe to leather. Let's hit a break here, and on the flip side, we'll talk a little Oklahoma State defense.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ, streaming free anywhere you are.
All right, guys, welcome back into Summer School on the Cover 3 College Football Podcast. That's McClain Baxley of Go Pokes 247, talking all things Oklahoma State. Let's turn to the defense now. And this was a defense that gave up 500 yards last year per game, which is just, good God. So they make a change at D coordinator, and Todd Grantham comes back. So I guess I'll ask you here, what is this going to look like, especially with the linebacker and secondary positions sort of decimated, at least with the exits? And I know they brought in quite a few portal additions.
Yeah, Todd Grantham knows football. He's been around the game for several. He's been around just as long as Gundy has. He's a year older than him, so he knows what to do. And I think being able to have that Rolodex for coaching staff, but also have the connections to bring in players and the namesake. If when he's out on the road recruiting, whether that's transfer kids or high school kids, having he worked at Alabama, he worked at Georgia, he worked at Florida, he worked in the NFL. So having that on your resume has been a big pro as far as kind of rebuilding this defense, like you talked about. They're going to want to get to the ball fast, and I think that's something that I think is kind of broad, but that's been a big focal point. They've brought in about 1,000 edge rushers and outside linebacker types that are fast, and that was the thing that they talked about all preseason, all spring season was getting to the quarterback and making life difficult for opposing quarterbacks. So they've got a lot of guys that can do that, both on the line and also in stand up, more linebacker placement. And then the secondary, like you said earlier, like we were talking about with the offensive line, the secondary can't get worse than it has been the last couple of years. So they've done a pretty good mix of having a couple of guys that are returning from last year, and then also bringing in guys from the portal that they're expected to make impacts pretty early on. So a good little mix of experience and veteranship, but also, guys that have been around the program and might be a little younger, but had the talent and have the, pass the eye test for these coaching staff.
Who are some of the guys that this team needs to have hit if they really want to take that big leap?
I think Brandon Rawls is the guy that sticks out. He's a linebacker coming from Saginaw Valley State. He had, a bunch of tackles at the Division II level, and he's a guy that kind of fits that. When you think of what should a linebacker look like, he looks like that. Him, Brian McCoy, and Trip White, those three linebackers, all transfers, all new guys, but all fit that mold of what they want to do defensively. So I think really locking down. Obviously, I don't know if they're going to be as good as a Nick Martin or Colin Oliver of years past, but they can be good enough to really kind of commander that defense. And then on the edge, Kyron Duhan, a guy from UTEP, he was a All-American freshman. Made the All-Conference USA team last year, with tons of tackles and a couple sacks. I think it's going to be interesting to see if he can, again, like we said, just kind of translate that to the Power 4 level, playing, in one of the top conferences in the country. So those are guys that I think that if Oklahoma State makes improvements defensively, which they're going to, because like you said, they 500 yards, there's no way to go backwards, I don't think. And I think they were next to last in team defense. So again, I don't know how much worse. I don't know. They don't want to be last this year. So yeah, I think those are the guys that they're going to be relying on to really make that jump this year.
Let's. Is there a guy we have not talked about on today's show that if he either finally hits his ceiling and plays up to his potential, or maybe he's a guy who arrives a year earlier than expected and actually plays up to his ability, maybe on an earlier timeline than we currently expect, that changes the fortunes of this Oklahoma State team?
I think a guy that I'm interested in seeing is David Kabongo. Last year, he was a freshman safety from Texas. He burned his red shirt last year playing in 5 or 6 games and looked pretty good, but you could definitely tell he was a freshman. I think that translation from the high school ranks to, the college ranks is definitely a big jump for the secondary. But he held his own, looked pretty good, especially in the second half of the season when, they weren't really playing for anything. They were just kind of at that point they were just playing to get experience against Power 5, Power 4 competition. So now with another year under his belt, another offseason under his belt, under a new coaching staff, obviously, I think he can impress as a guy that in a room full of veteran talent, both transfers and guys that have been around. He's a younger guy, but he's now a true sophomore, having burned that red shirt. So I think that he's gonna be a guy that I'm gonna look for and see how big that jump is and what impact it has on the Cowboys defense this year.
How do you define success for this team in 25?
I think you got to get to a bowl game. I mean, I know most fans, want to say that they're going to make the Big 12 championship and compete for a playoff spot. That's not going to happen this year, I don't think. And I think, to save Gundy's job, to save the trajectory of this program, I think you've got to get that, 6-7 wins under your belt and show that you're on the right path. You make all these hires, you bring in, you completely renovate the roster. They've got, 40-something transfers coming in. So I think you've got to kind of prove it by making a bowl game, winning at least 6 games. Ideally 7, I think, would be the magic number to, keep his job security for going into 26. But yeah, I think a good season would be getting to a bowl game and restarting that long bowl streak that there was a lot of pride in until it fell short last year. So that's what I think it would be a good season, and we'll see if they can do that.
We'll certainly be watching it. This is, I think, for my money, one of the most interesting storylines to follow this year in college football. With one starter back on offense, 2 new coordinators, just wild, man. I really appreciate all the time, McClain, and we'll be following your work on Go Pokes 247.
Sounds good.